Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pals Go to the Movies. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hi, guys.
And today we're going to be talking about Zombieland Double Tap. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. So in Zombieland Double Tap, we join Columbus, Tallahassee, Wichita, and Little Rock 10 years after the first Zombieland. We find they now reside in the White House, and the zombies have now evolved and become faster and well adapted to the hunts, and now they have to learn to adapt against the new zombies, while also dealing with the pains of the snarky makeshift family they have become. So as far as the cast goes, we have the main four revising the roles: Woody Harrelson as Tallahassee, Jesse Eisenberg as Columbus, Emma Stone as Wichita, Abigail Breslin as Little Rock, and we have new faces joining in. We have Zoe Deutch as Madison. We have Evan Jogia as Berkeley. We have Rocio Dawson as Nevada. We have Luke Wilson as Albuquerque. And we have Thomas Middleditch as Flagstaff. So let's start with my pros. First of all, we have Emma Stone, who I have to say is my bias. And I think her personality in this movie alongside Jesse Eisenberg's role is a perfect mismatch couple. Also, Woody Harrelson and Abigail, they do sell the father and daughter chemistry, even to the point that we feel the awkwardness of the parent embarrassing moments from Woody Harrelson. The movie does have tons of jokes that range from being funny satire to just silly jokes. Same as before, we have the same action that is driven by a simple, somewhat believable plot, which is what we wanted to see in this movie. We just want to zombie out and we just want to enjoy the second part of this movie. We also have new people that join the story. Like, for example, we have Madison, who plays the dumb survival girl who basically throws a wrench into the relationship between Wichita and Columbus. But we also have other ones that are questionable. So this leads me to my cons. We have new characters that they kind of mirror Tallahassee and Columbus in a way. But my con is that they came and went a bit too fast for my taste. I would have liked it if they would have had stayed a bit longer, maybe developed the story, or played devil's advocate to some of the characters. Also, the zombies were a bit of a letdown in my personal opinion to the makeup. I know the movie's not really about them, but at least they could have dressed them up a little bit more, especially the ones who had the close-up deaths. And my last con is that I really wanted to see Tallahassee craving that Twinkie, like in part 1. God damn it, I really wanted him to want that Twinkie. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Touly and see how he saw the film.
So Zombieland is actually one of my favorite zombie-like movies of all time. And I think it was relative to when the movie came out. So back in 2009, when the first Zombieland came out and I saw it, it really grew on me because of its unique presentation. Of course, we run into the typical setup of strangers meeting up with each other, having to build that trust. So eventually they'll be able to coexist with one another. And of course, at the end of that film, you were starting to get the sense that they were a family. And then, of course, we get all the nuances from that film. Sal mentioned Woody Harrelson's character, Tallahassee, and his desire of trying to get a Twinkie. And also Jesse Eisenberg's character, Columbus, and his fascination with coming up with new rules or abiding by the rules that he has since the zombie breakout so that he could survive. And of course, we have Wichita and Little Rock, who between themselves, they have certain rules that were established in that film. And all of these aspects, minus the Twinkie part, I thought they carried over to Zombieland Double Tap. I guess what I'm trying to say is Zombieland Double Tap sort of does have that charm from Zombieland, but it wasn't there entirely. And for me personally, I felt that maybe the film was rushed in a way, despite it coming out years later. Like, if this film had come out a couple years after the first one, like maybe the amount of time that has passed by would have made a little more sense to where they're currently at. Because there was so much time that has gone by, I sort of feel like I was missing something. Like, what happened in between? In the end, I sort of just saw this film as a chapter to their overarching life in this Zombieland versus the original, the first film, where it gave us almost like a full-fledged book. Here's this character. Who was this character before? And now, how are they going to thrive in this new zombie apocalyptic country that they're living in? There was a more believable plot in that story versus what happened in this film, where it felt really random. I'm not saying that randomness did not exist in the first one too, but at least it made a whole lot more sense. There was motivation behind characters, and it made sense. Versus this one, it seemed like, let's just have Abigail's character, Little Rock, have this desire to want to be with people her own age. So that's enough motivation for her to go off with this pacifist dude who they named Berkeley and join their crew all of a sudden. Wichita's character, played by Emma Stone, we suddenly find out that she has commitment problems and she doesn't want to marry Columbus when he proposed. It's sort of these randomness that they introduced and didn't follow up on in a more inspirational sort of way. For example, instead of introducing all these other characters, which to a certain extent I was fine with, I kind of appreciated Madison, the character in there, the blonde. Zoe Deutsch did a great job of portraying that sort of a character. And despite that character being annoying, I got the feeling that they were trying to go for, so great job there. But let's say like Madison and the pacifist dude Berkeley, all those other characters weren't there, and it was just about Tallahassee, Columbus, Wichita, and Little Rock yet again, the sort of problems that they haven't encountered yet at that point in time. Going back to what I said, having the film not take place just a couple years after the first one, 10 years later, it feels like a lot of the problems that could have happened between the group should have already happened within that time span. Like the commitment problem that Wichita has with settling down with Columbus. Like I felt like maybe that could have already happened years ago, but they decided to just bring it up in this film and use it as a motivation for Wichita to run away with Little Rock yet again. All these motivations that you guys are setting up with these characters, they didn't quite hit the spot for me because the setup wasn't that great and the follow through wasn't that great either. The one thing though that I really enjoyed was the intro of the film, particularly when they were talking about how zombies have evolved since the last time we saw them. And they mentioned the Ninja, the Homer, the Hawken, and then we find out later that there's the most dangerous one of them all, the T-800, named after the Terminator film. That was great. I liked that they introduced all these different types of new zombies. It reminded me of Left 4 Dead, having played that game, where there are different types of zombies, and now, like, if they run into these zombies in very specific situations, it'll make the movie feel that much more tense. You know, maybe one of the characters got separated, and they're in this very dark area or something where there's not a lot of ways to escape or whatever, and they run into a ninja as well. It's like, what would this character do in that situation? Unfortunately, we don't get that. And that sort of adds to my idea of this film not following through with what they initially set up, and the film fell flat afterwards. The only zombie, the most dangerous one of them all, it was basically the T-800. And when they showcased that zombie for the first time, I was like, okay, I could buy in how dangerous this zombie can be because it could dodge bullets and it takes a lot to take it down. So I was like, okay, if there was just like a one-on-one encounter with this thing, I'm pretty sure there would be a struggle. But then at the end of the film, we get a bunch of them, or at least 1,000 at the minimum, heading towards Babylon, where all these characters have come together. And somehow nobody ended up dying, despite how much of a struggle Tallahassee had in just getting rid of one. I don't know what happened to the T-800s at that point. If you just threw like 100 of these guys at the group who were at Babylon, I feel like the characters would not have survived, really. And this is including our four main characters, Tallahassee, Columbus, Wichita, and Little Rock as well. So it's again, suspension of belief. You guys kind of lost me there. And then there was also this moment where they met the doppelgangers of themselves. Talked about Tallahassee, Columbus, and I suppose, I could be wrong, that Rosario Dawson's character in Nevada was supposed to be the doppelganger of Emma Stone's character Wichita. I could be wrong there. I kind of sort of resemble it. At the same time, I could say, no, not really. But definitely Tallahassee and Columbus. They encountered their doppelganger. And that definitely reminded me of Shaun of the Dead, which was a film that Sal and I reviewed a couple weeks ago. It was a funny gag right at the start, but it kind of dragged on a little bit, and it wasn't anything different. Maybe because, I've seen so many attempts at this doppelganger sort of things, again, since 2009 onward, it lost its impact that it would initially have on you. So it definitely had that sort of effect on me. Like, it was like, oh, okay, I guess they're going that route. Let's see what they do with the, okay, nothing too special. I could have done without that, really. The positives of this film really was, I did like the film wasn't that long. It was about 1 hour and 40. It's around that time that I would say, had the film gone the route that I wanted it to go, given what it had presented to me at the beginning of the film with the different type of zombies and the sort of relationships that these characters had with one another, and these sort of things been developed throughout the story instead of involving all these other characters that I felt that was unnecessary, then yeah, an hour and 40 minutes would have been perfect for this film. I feel like around that range. It's just the way they went about it that didn't really interest me, because truth be told, right when I got back home from watching this film, I went back and watched the original to see why I liked the first one so much versus this one. And yeah, like a lot of the things that they did in that first one, they actually used in this one as well. Like all the gags, well, a lot of the gags they used in that one, they used in this one, from Tallahassee's line to when he swung, forgot what it was, he swung at the Elvis place, but Columbus was running toward her and it was like, don't swing, now swing. They actually, if you guys recall, did the same thing in the original Zombieland as well. So they did rehash some of the things that they did in the first Zombieland, but maybe did it a little differently in this one, which I'm okay with because it's just like a callback, but I wish they would have added a whole lot more stuff. Like, for example, Columbus adding more rules to his book and using that as a guide throughout the film, because that was one of the thing that I loved about the first one. Like, it constantly was being brought up. You saw the wordings on the screen, like which rule he was using at that particular point. I thought that should have still been an emphasis in this film, like to a higher degree, because that was a theme in the first one. So it kind of lost that aspect to a certain extent. The film was alright overall, but with like a steady watch. The highs that I felt were supposed to be highs, I didn't really felt that way about them. And the lows of the film, like they were there as to be to sort of get you to feel that way. I felt like I was just at a medium throughout the film, despite going to the film with no expectations. Maybe that was my way to kind of help the film be better, because I wanted the film to be elevated to a level that was higher than I was expecting, but it didn't even do that for me. So there was a post-credits scene with Bill Murray. The way I kind of looked at it was them trying to make up for what they did to Bill Murray in the first Zombieland film. And I would say I'm indifferent about it. I guess it's great that they're trying to make Bill Murray seem like a badass, or given what happened to him in the first film. But was it necessary? I will be inclined to say no. It's just like a little extra sort of thing. It doesn't really change the story in a way, other than maybe letting you know who was patient zero. I think that was the sort of like the title of that ending credit scene. Like they introduced you to patient zero, which I believe was Al Brokaw, if I'm not mistaken there. There wasn't really much they could have shown that would have made me feel differently about that film. I'm not sure if that makes any sense. Like, I was already to that point where I wouldn't say I'm done with the film. I'm not saying all these things to imply that the film was that bad, but it just felt really random and incomplete. And I feel like adding another scene like that with Bill Murray did not really add any value to what I've already saw.
I totally agree with everything you said right there. I mean, let's start off with saying that the film should have came out sooner. The closer it would have been to part one, I think I would have appreciated it more. It's like this taste that you have and you liked it and you want to try it again. The sooner the better. But once you delay it, you start losing interest in it. I went to see it because I liked the first one like you did too, but it didn't really wow me. I'm pretty sure I kind of enjoyed it because I liked the first one and it reminded me of the first one. Like you said, there's some of the gags that were in the first one got revised again, and that kind of made me chuckle or say, hey, I remember this one. But nowadays, it's like 10 years later to come up with the sequel to the original one with the same actors. That's the only thing that this had going for it, basically, that appealed to me, other than I liked the film. But there's other movies that have come out. For example, there's one that recently came out with Bill Murray itself, The Dead Don't Die, which is another basically zombie movie that pokes fun at the zombie genre. I went to see that one and I think I like that one a little better than this one, just because it's a different taste. And like Touly said, when this one originally came out in 2009, it was a breath of fresh air. But now, 10 years later, it's again the same thing with the same gags and everything. Not saying that it's a bad movie. I enjoyed parts of the movie, but there's parts of it that kind of made me wonder. I would say if I would change anything, it would be at the end where they headed out and they were looking to see where they were going to go, and they said home, and then he said, aren't we already there? I would actually have them set out to go look for the island. The original idea that Tallahassee had in the movie earlier, where he said we should just go to an island. Why haven't we done that? That way the zombies won't get to us because we're surrounded by water. And if they did that and ended up arriving to an island and all of a sudden have Madison or Berkeley pop up and say, wow, what a surprise seeing you guys here. And then have Tallahassee just start running, screaming like a madman away from everybody. I mean, that would have been at least that funny gag to end the movie with. And also, there's some jokes in the movie that kind of made up for the time period that had elapsed. For example, the joke about the Uber idea. You know, it happened in our time, but not their time. So they're laughing at that idiotic concept coming out of Madison's mouth. But we see it as we know what she's talking about, and it's a functioning concept right now. Also, when Columbus is reading The Walking Dead and says how unrealistic it is, and then puts the comic book down, that scene made me giggle because I was like, I watched that, and I also believe the concept is kind of far-fetched as a believable concept. But the scene that basically left me wanting more was the mirror image scene. It was kind of hilarious, but they carried on a little bit too long, and the characters died right away. I would actually liked it if they would have continued and maybe play the devil's advocate. Maybe Wichita would have fallen in love with Flagstaff or something like that. It kind of had that little feeling of like these guys are gonna headbutt each other till an issue happens or somebody like swings at somebody else, but it didn't never happen. It kind of fell short. I actually would have wanted it to be a part of the story that was going to develop, but it never did. Also, the ending credit scene with Bill Murray, to me, it just seemed like it was an awkward thing. Like they just wanted to have Bill Murray there. I already thought they established that he was a badass in part 1 because he was alive and he was dressed up as a zombie. And for him, that was his way of getting around. Why did you have to do it again? And the way they did it didn't really make me feel that it added anything, like Touly said, to the movie. I could have not seen it and I'd be okay with it. I felt that it was just something else they needed to cram in there just to make us feel nostalgia from the first movie. So with that, I'm going to ask Touly for his final grade of the movie.
All right, so just to quickly sum up how I felt about this film before I give it my grade. Film, good on star power. Sal already mentioned the plentiful of actors and actresses that are in this film, so that's a plus, I would say, in my book. The concepts they presented, they were there, from different type of zombies to the sort of motivation these characters have in this film. They were there. I also liked Madison's character, played by Zoe Deutch. Great job there at presenting a character of that stereotype and to the degree of being annoying. Yeah, I think the cons sort of outweighs the pros that I had about this film, from not following through with the setups to suspension of belief with the T-800s. It seemed like there were homers at the end, and it's ironic they introduced the homer into the film because those were no T-800s at the end of the film, to my assessment. And yeah, how I described it earlier too, this just felt like it was a chapter in these people's lives versus another book to the series. If you like the nostalgic factor that they took inspiration from the first film, sort of charm that you got from the first film, they're still there to a certain degree. And I would say you would still be okay with the film like I am. So I'm going to give the film a 5 out of 10.
So my grade is a 5.5 out of 10. It's a lot lower than the first one. And I think I expected a better story, but instead I got a lower caliber part 1 for part 2. So in my book, they did not do what they said. They didn't nut up, so they should have just shut up. By this, I mean they shouldn't have delayed it as long as they did, because that basically didn't get me interested as much as if it would have came out a year or two after the first one. I mean, I liked it, I enjoyed it, but not as much as I think I wanted to enjoy it, if that makes sense. I was expecting more from the story. The characters and the acting was pretty good. I enjoyed it, but I wanted a little more story, like Touly said, background, a little more in between the years that we were missing, but we never got that. They hinted at it, but they never delivered. Well, I did get what I wanted. I did get to see Emma Stone play Wichita again, so that's a good, and I ain't mad about that. But other than that, this movie, if you're a fan, go see it, but don't expect it's going to be as good as part 1. If you never saw part 1, I won't recommend to go see this one because you will be out of the loop and you won't get some of the jokes that reference from part 1. So that does it for the review of Zombieland Double Tap. Please join us next time when we review Dr. Sleep.
But the things that live there,
hello, Danny.
they come back.
Come and play with us forever and ever.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below, and like always, keep watching movies.